The autumn rain drummed a relentless rhythm against the tin roof of the milking barn, masking the sound of Hannah's weeping. It was from Caleb, the one man her father had forbidden her to speak to, the one man the community whispered about in hushed, judgmental tones. "Meet me by the covered bridge at midnight." To not tread. Hannah's heart hammered against her ribs. To go was to defy her dead and the bishop. To stay was to let her soul wither. As the lantern flickered in the draught, Hannah made her choice. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Lancaster County like a heavy, gray quilt that refused to be folded away. It was late October, and the air held the crisp, biting promise of a coming winter. The corn had been cut, leaving the fields a stubble, brown and brittle against the damp earth. Inside the Stoltzfus farmhouse, the day had begun hours ago. The smell of frying scrapple and strong coffee filled the kitchen, warring with the scent of kerosene from the lamps that were slowly being extinguished as the sun fought to rise. 19-year-old Hannah Stoltzfus moved with practiced efficiency, her bare feet silent on the worn wooden floorboards. She tied the strings of her black apron, smoothing the fabric over her dress. Her hands were rough from work, but her touch was gentle. Her father, Samuel, sat at the head of the table, his face as stony as the creek bed. "He is back," Samuel said, his voice low and rumbling. He didn't look up from his plate, but everyone knew who he meant. Caleb Miller, the boy who had left for his Rumspringa 2 years ago, and reportedly traded his plain clothes for blue jeans and a fast truck. The boy who had broken the heart of the community. Hannah felt a sudden heat rise in her cheeks, and she turned quickly to the stove to hide it. Caleb was back. She remembered him not as the rebel the elders spoke of, but as the boy who used to catch fireflies with her by the creek, the boy who had once carved a small wooden bird and given it to her when no one was looking. Later that morning, as the black buggies lined up along the gravel lane of the host family's farm for the church service, Hannah saw him. He was standing near the back of the barn, separating the men from the women, as was the custom. He wore the traditional broadfall trousers and suspenders, but they looked new, stiff. He had cut his hair back to the regulation length, but his face was tanned from the world outside. Their eyes met across the crowded barn, over the heads of the children and the bonnets of the women. In that split second, the hymn being sung faded into the background. Hannah saw sorrow in his eyes. Deep, profound sorrow. And she knew, despite what her father said, that Caleb hadn't come back to cause trouble. He had come back to heal. The weeks that followed Caleb's return were filled with whispering. The community was slow to forgive. They watched him closely as he worked his father's farm, waiting for him to slip up, waiting for a hidden radio or a pack of cigarettes to appear. When she took the buggy into town to sell her jams and quilts at the market, she would scan the passing carriages. One Tuesday, under a sky the color of bruised plums, fate intervened. The wheel of Hannah's market wagon hit a deep rut on a lonely stretch of road. Snapping a spoke, the buggy lurched, and the horse, a skittish mare named Bessie, whinnied in panic. Hannah struggled with the reins, her heart racing. Suddenly, another buggy pulled up alongside her. A figure jumped down, moving with easy strength. It was Caleb. He didn't say a word at first, just moved to Bessie's head, calming the animal with a soft, low murmur. "Are you hurt, Hannah?" he asked, finally looking at her. His voice was deeper than she remembered. "Rougher?" "No, just shaken," she whispered, clutching her shawl tight. "And the wheel. I don't think I can make it to town." Caleb knelt in the mud, inspecting the damage. His hands were scarred, telling stories of hard labor in the English world. "I can fix it enough to get you home," he said, standing up. "But you'll have to drive slow." For 20 minutes, they stood on the side of the road as he worked with the tools from his buggy. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of unasked questions. "Why did you come back, Caleb?" she finally dared to ask. He paused, a wrench in his hand. He looked out at the bare trees. "Because out there ... it is loud. Hannah, it is so loud you cannot hear your own thoughts. And you certainly cannot hear God. He looked at her then, his gaze intense. And because I remembered the way the light hits the creek in the evening, and I remembered you. Hannah's breath hitched. Such words were dangerous. They were approaching a line that could not be My dad says you are not to be trusted, she said softly. He says the world is still in your heart, but he cannot see inside my heart. Only God can do that. And now, you. Winter arrived early that year, covering Lancaster County in a thick blanket of white snow. The days grew short, and the evenings were spent by the warmth of the wood stove. The connection between Hannah and Caleb had shifted from a chance encounter to something deliberate, something hidden. They didn't meet often, but they found ways. A note tucked into a basket of apples left at the miller's porch. A brief conversation behind the barn during a community frolic to husk corn. It was innocent, yet in the eyes of the Ordnung, the secrecy made it a sin. Hannah felt the weight of the deception. She hated lying to a young man dead, but she couldn't stop her heart from pulling toward Caleb. The crisis came on a Tuesday evening. Hannah sat by the kerosene lamp, quilting. She had a small piece of paper in her apron pocket, a letter Caleb had given her at the market. She had read it a dozen times. He had written about his desire to be baptized in the spring, to fully join the church. He wanted to court her properly. Her father, Samuel, walked into the room, stomping the snow off his heavy boots. He looked tired, his beard gray and weathered. "Hannah," he said, his voice stern, "I spoke with Bishop Abram today." Hannah froze, her needle hovering over the fabric. "About what?" "Dead." "About Caleb Miller." Samuel walked over to the fire, warming his hands. "The bishop says he saw you talking to him near the feed store. He says you looked too familiar." Samuel turned, his eyes narrowing. "Is there something you are keeping from us, daughter?" Hannah's heart pounded. She was not a good liar. We spoke. Dead. He helped me with the wagon wheel weeks ago. He is trying to be good." Samuel's face darkened. "He is not one of us, Hannah. Not in his spirit. He wants to be baptized." Hannah blurted out, defending him. "He wants to join the church." Samuel stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "And is that for God, or is it for you?" The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. "Give me your apron, Hannah." Hannah trembled. "Dad. Give it to me." He reached out and took the apron she had been clutching. He felt the paper in the pocket. He pulled it out, unfolding the note. As he read Caleb's words of affection and faith, his face went pale with anger. He tossed the note into the fire. "You will not speak to him again," Samuel commanded, his voice shaking with restrained emotion. "If he approaches you, you will walk away. If you do not, Hannah. If you choose him over our ways, you know what will happen. You will be shunning your own family. Do not break your mother's heart." The following month was a valley of shadows for Hannah. She obeyed her father. She had the threat of being separated from her family, of being the cause of their shame, was too great. When she saw Caleb at church, she looked at the floor. When the buggies passed on the road, she stared straight ahead, though tears blurred her vision. She could see the confusion and hurt on Caleb's face. He didn't understand why she had gone cold. He thought perhaps he had been wrong, that she didn't care for him after all. The isolation ate at Hannah. The farm, usually a place of comfort, felt like a prison. The silence of the winter nights was no longer peaceful. It was lonely. One evening, her mother, Sarah, found Hannah weeping in the pantry while sorting potatoes. Sarah, a quiet woman who usually deferred to Samuel, placed a hand on Hannah's shoulder. "It is a hard thing," Sarah whispered, "to kill a feeling that has taken root." "I love him, Mung May," Hannah choked out. "And he is good. Why can't Dad see it?" Sarah sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. "Your father is afraid. He loves you so much that he wants to protect you from pain. He thinks Caleb will leave again, and if he takes you, We will lose you to the English world forever. His fear makes him hard. Meanwhile, Caleb was struggling. Without Hannah's encouragement, the darkness of his past temptations began to whisper to him. Why stay where he was, unwanted? Why work so hard for a community that looked at him with suspicion? He began to pack his bag. He thought about leaving for Ohio, or maybe even back to the city. If he couldn't have Hannah, this life was just toil and judgment. It was the night of the great blizzard of January that changed everything. The snow began falling in the afternoon and didn't stop. By nightfall, the drifts were 3 feet high, and the wind howled like a wounded animal. The temperature plummeted 2 dangerous lows. Samuel had gone out to check on a neighbor's cow that was calving. He should have been back hours ago. Hannah paced the kitchen floor, the clock ticking loudly. He should be here, she said, looking out the window into the swirling white void. The road by the creek floods when it snows like this. Sarah looked worried. I will light the lantern on the porch. Pray, Hannah. But prayers didn't stop the wind. By midnight, Samuel had not returned. Panic set in. The roads were impassable for a buggy. Someone had to go on foot or horseback, but there were no men in the house. Hannah threw on her heavy wool cloak. I'm going to the miller's, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. Caleb has a strong draft horse. He can help. Sarah grabbed her arm. Your father forbid it. My father is freezing to death in a ditch somewhere. Hannah cried, pulling away. I don't care about the rules tonight. I care about Dad. She fought her way through the snowdrifts to the Miller farm. A quarter-mile away, the wind bit her face, stinging her eyes. When she pounded on Caleb's door, he opened it, looking shocked to see her half frozen on his porch. Hannah! He pulled her inside. Where is Samuel? She gasped. He never came home. Without a second of hesitation, Caleb grabbed his coat and lantern. He didn't ask questions. He didn't mention the shunning or the cold shoulder she had given him. He simply went to the barn, saddled his massive Percheron workhorse, and hoisted Hannah up behind him. Hold on tight, he yelled over the wind. They rode into the storm, the horse plowing through chest-deep snow. Caleb tracked the path Samuel would have taken. Near the creek, they found Italiano. The buggy had slid off the icy bridge and into the ravine. The horse was tangled in the harness, and the buggy was smashed on its side. Samuel was thrown clear, but he was half buried in the snow, unconscious, his leg twisted at a terrible angle. Caleb jumped down, sliding down the embankment. He ripped off his own coat to wrap around Samuel. He worked feverishly to free the horse, and then, with strength born of desperation, he carried Hannah's father up the steep, icy slope. Hannah watched him, tears freezing on her cheeks. He wasn't an outsider. He wasn't a rebel. He was a man who would risk his life for the man who despised him. They managed to get Samuel onto the horse. Caleb walked the whole way back, leading the horse, shielding Samuel's body from the wind with his own body, while Hannah held her father steady. The recovery was slow. Samuel lay in the downstairs bedroom for weeks, his leg in a cast, his body weak from hypothermia. Caleb came by every day not to see Hannah, but to do Samuel's chores. He milked the cows, cleared the snow, and fixed the broken buggy. He did it silently, expecting nothing. One evening, as the thaw of spring began to drip from the eaves, Samuel called for Hannah. Is Caleb in the barn? He asked, his voice gruff, but weaker than before. Yes. Dead, Hannah replied. He is mending the fence. Tell him to come inside. Hannah's heart raced. She ran to the barn and fetched Caleb. He entered the house, removing his hat, standing respectfully by the door. He looked tired, worn down by doing the work of 2 farms. Samuel looked at the young man. He looked at the rough hands, the humble posture. You saved my life, Caleb Miller, Samuel said, and you have kept my farm running when you owed me nothing. Caleb looked down. It is what neighbors do, Samuel. Samuel shook his head. No. It is what a son does." The room went silent. Hannah held her breath. Samuel looked at his daughter, then back to Caleb. "I was wrong. I looked at your clothes and your past, and I did not look at your fruit. You are a good man. If you still wish to be baptized, and if you still wish to court my daughter, you have my blessing." Caleb's eyes filled with tears. He looked at Hannah, and for the first time in months he smiled a true, open smile. "I do," he whispered. 3 years later, the golden corn stood tall again in the fields of Lancaster. The sun was setting, casting a warm, amber glow over the porch of the farmhouse. Hannah sat on the swing, the rhythmic creak, a comforting sound. In her arms, a sleeping baby bundled in a white blanket breathed softly. A buggy pulled up the lane, the gravel crunching under the wheels. Caleb hopped down, his beard now fully grown, marking him as a married man of the church. He walked up the steps, smelling of hay and hard work. He sat beside Hannah, wrapping a strong arm around her and their child. They didn't need to speak. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of peace, full of fight, and full of a love that had weathered the storm. As the fireflies began to dance over the lawn, Hannah rested her head on his shoulder, grateful for the road that had led them home.